Imagine that you wake up early in the morning and instead of having a cup of tea, you go to queue for bread. A few hours later, the store might say, "There is no bread." This is not an episode from a movie. This is how millions of people lived in the Soviet Union. But why did the country, which prided itself on a powerful economy, lack the simplest products? The main reason for the queues was the planned economy. The government decided how much meat, sugar, or milk each city needed. Everything looked perfect on paper, but the reality was quite different. For example, in the 1980s, at the height of the shortage, people could stand for meat for days at a time. In large cities like Moscow or Leningrad, store shelves were still somehow filled, but in small villages, meat, butter, and sugar might not appear for months. Residents had to exchange goods between regions, as if the days of barter trade had returned. What did it look like in real life? People would line up at dawn, often for goods they didn't even know if they would be brought. They'd spread rumors amongst each other. "Chickens coming today." And the whole neighborhood was already on its feet. For example, in one of the regions of the Urals in 1985, more than 1,000 people gathered behind a wagon with sugar. And this is not an exaggeration. The queues stretched for hundreds of meters and sometimes even more. The situation was aggravated by transportation disruptions and erroneous calculations. Factories produced thousands of tons of goods, but while they reached the stores, a third of the products could spoil. Interestingly, the problem was not that there was a complete shortage of products. For example, on paper, sugar production exceeded the country's needs, but the distribution system failed. As a result, people bought everything just in case. This created a snowball effect. If meat was brought in, even those who didn't need it bought it. But what else was behind the long lines? Who got access to products without queuing, and why were the shelves of some stores bursting with food while others were empty? In the Soviet Union, not everyone could get products that were considered delicacies. But there were those who always had a way out. Such a way out was called blat, connections and acquaintances that opened doors even where they were closed for ordinary people. What is blat in practice? Imagine a store with a long line for sausage. At the counter, the seller leaves the coveted sticks of sausage for his own, relatives, friends, or acquaintances of bosses. The queue may not even suspect that the goods have already been distributed in advance. In Moscow, for example, sausage was such a popular commodity, by blat, that it was often transported in small suitcases. Someone would say, "I'm going to Moscow to visit relatives," and return with meat delicacies. For store clerks, blat was not only a way to earn extra money, but also protection. In those days, complaints about a shortage of products could lead to serious trouble. Store workers often created so-called black lists. They included people who complained about shopkeepers or wrote letters to the local council. People on such lists could even lose access to a minimum set of groceries. Blat worked at all levels. For example, if you had an acquaintance in the administration, you could get a coupon for imported boots, a cut of cloth, or even a rare scarcity like coffee. At the same time, for most ordinary people, blat was inaccessible. They could only dream of those goods that were obtained by acquaintance. Why did blat become so important? First, it was the only way to survive in conditions of total scarcity. Secondly, it emphasized that the system could not provide for everyone equally. The very existence of blat said that legal methods, standing in lines and waiting for goods, were not working well. But what were the secrets behind the blat? Where did the products that went to the chosen few actually come from? And most importantly, how did this system destroy trust between people? In the 1980s, when goods began to disappear from the shelves, coupons became the only way to get the essentials. Talons are special cards or coupons that were issued to each person for a limited amount of goods. A kilogram of sugar, pack of butter, a bottle of milk. It would seem to be fair. Everyone gets the same. But in practice, everything was different. In large families, children received their coupons, and parents tried to gather them together to stock up. People even arranged with neighbors and acquaintances to take their coupons. For example, in one Leningrad family, the wife took coupons from her co-workers in order to buy more flour and make bread at home. But everything was not so simple with coupons either. Sometimes you could buy only the cheapest goods with them, and sometimes there were surprises. For example, it was suddenly announced that the coupons were used to buy candy or condensed milk. It would seem to be a gift, but these goods did not go to everyone. They could be taken by blat or simply sold out in a matter of hours. Why did coupons become an important part of life? It was because they gave some kind of guarantee. Without a coupon, you could simply be left with nothing. People kept them in special boxes, wrote down what goods they had already received, and kept track of the dates. If you missed the time, the goods would not be given to you. An interesting case happened in one of the Ural cities in 1984. They suddenly started giving out imported cookies on coupons. The queue lined up several hours before the store opened. Many people didn't even know what they were handing out. They just stood there hoping that something would be given. The coupon system showed how far shortages can go. People got used to seeing substitutes rather than products. The coupon became a symbol, not of equality, but of survival. It showed that even minimal needs could not be met without control from above. Queues became a real social phenomenon. Here, not only people waited for food, but also got acquainted, discussed the latest news, shared rumors. People joked that in the queue you could find not only food, but also friends. But the queue could also become a place for conflicts. If someone tried to pass without queue, loud arguments would start. Sometimes it took 24 hours to queue, so families organized shifts. For example, the father could stand at night, the mother in the morning, and the children in the afternoon. In the 80s, such stories were especially frequent. Interestingly, everything from recipes to politics was discussed in the queues. In the Soviet Union, it was dangerous to talk openly about party problems, but people felt freer in line. Why can't such a strong country feed its citizens? They asked each other. These conversations were risky, but the need to speak out often took over. However, living in lines also formed other habits. People began to value not the products themselves, but their availability. Did you buy an extra kilogram of sugar? Never mind, it will come in handy. In such conditions, wastefulness was unthinkable. Each bought oil or cereal turned into a small achievement. Queues in the USSR were not just an economic problem, but a phenomenon that shaped an entire generation. Behind the usual patience, there was discontent and a desire to change the system. But people learned to cope with difficulties with the help of humor and ingenuity.